When I first heard that the average millionaire has 7 sources of income, I remember thinking, how do people have time for 7 jobs? Growing up, I thought that money meant trading your time for a 9 to 5. It meant like becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And because I'm South Asian, those were like the only options available. So in this podcast, I'm going to be sharing my 10 sources of income that I have developed between the ages of 15 to 28, breaking down the real numbers for full transparency, because I really do believe if I'm going to be talking about money online, you guys deserve to know my actual numbers, which is scary to do, I'm not going to lie, but I think it's going to be helpful because you'll actually be able to see which ones are worth your time and which ones I honestly would not recommend. And they're broken down into 3 groups. The first group is trading my soul, my time for money, more like 9 to 5 kind of jobs. The second is selling in my sleep. And the third is actual passive income. So I'm excited to share all 3. And again, I will be sharing actual numbers. I will be as transparent as possible. It is a little uncomfortable doing this because people in my real life know me and see this, but I think it's okay. I don't think it's anything negative. And if anything, you can kind of see, okay, well, that worked out, but that didn't. Because realistically, being rich is not just earning a high income. That's what I thought. In fact, being wealthy is what you want to aim for, not being rich, because being wealthy means having assets that bring you income. I remember I had 2 friends. We were at my birthday, and one friend said, "What income do you think you need to have to be considered rich?" And the other friend said, "I think if you're rich, you actually don't have a job. You have things bringing in money." And we were both so stunned because we were like, oh my God, that's true. Something that's like assets that pay you while you sleep instead of trading your time for money. That's insane. But anyway, the first category of my income sources from age 15 to 28 is trading my soul, my time, for income. The first income source was my 9 to 5 job when I was an optometrist, and I was making $75,000 in my first year, which at the time I was so impressed by because I remember that someone a lot older than me in my life was making $90,000 a year. And I remember thinking that was so impressive. So to be at 75 was huge for me. It took me 5 years to study and become an optometrist. And where I studied in New Zealand, they only let 60 optometrists train per year in the entire country, but it's a very small country of like 5 million. So it doesn't really mean that much. It sounds more impressive than it actually is to be like, yes, I was one of 50 or one of 60. And $75,000 a year was amazing. I think there's a misconception that I didn't enjoy my job, and that's why I became an investor and started investing. But I was investing in university, and I just thought I would grow up and become like an optometrist that had lots of businesses, and those businesses would just keep funneling my investments. Would I recommend this? I would actually say yes, because there is something so powerful in knowing that even though I trained in this for 5 years and don't practice it now, I still kept my training certificate for a year. And I know that if I ever want to go back to it, I can just pick up my CPD points. I can go back, and I always have this thing to fall back on, this career that I'm trained in that I can just turn up for and get a job or start being a locum, which is where you're like a reliever teacher, but for optometrists, and you just travel and go where they need you if someone's away for a week or if someone else is sick. So even though it was a job that took a lot of time to get into, I actually have no regrets. And I always think your 9 to 5 is your first investor. And I think it was a fantastic starting point for my career. The second income stream that I had was tutoring. And in tutoring, I would tutor children, teenagers younger than me in maths, English, science, so like physics, chemistry, biology. I was a real nerd growing up, and I am proud of it. I think if you see photos of me when I was younger, I had -6 prescription glasses, which explains the optometry actually, doesn't it? But I was just so incredibly nerdy. I love that about myself. I hold it with pride, but I just love teaching. And I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of like part of who I am today, sitting here talking to you about what I've learned in my money journey, how I learned to invest, what investments I like, learning how to take studies of different types of investors and then putting it together and being like, hey, the studies show this or studies show that. I love the teaching side. So it naturally made sense that when my mum told me that we had a family friend that was kind of struggling with, I think, science or maths at the time, if I could help. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I can charge $20 an hour. I knew a friend that worked for a tutoring company that was charging $40 an hour. And I had a lot of fun doing it. It's always always so nerve-wracking when you are a teacher to someone because you're like, what do I know that they don't know? But I quickly realized that I did have a knack for it. And while the enjoyment was like a 10 out of 10 for me, the amount of money I was getting for the amount of work I was putting in was not a lot. I mean, $20 an hour. I did 1 hour a week. So that was about $1,040 a year. And compared to $75,000 a year as an optometrist, it wasn't a lot. It was something that I even tried to scale. Like I set up a website and I was like, I'm going to start a tutoring business. And guys, I did not have one single customer from that. Like I spent so long on that website and I even got desperate and I asked my mum, I was like, hey, can you ask your friends if they have anyone else need tutoring? And the answer was no. But the child that I was tutoring was like, oh, I also need help in English and I also need help in maths. And so I ended up tutoring the same person, sometimes more than an hour a week. But if it comes to looking back at this as an income source, it was very limited. And I also had to be there physically, like I had to be at home. Same with my optometrist job. I had to be at work. So not only was it a time suck, but it was also a location anchoring way of making money. Like I couldn't do this from anywhere else. I mean, this was pre like Zoom calls or pre being able to tutor over a computer. Wow, that made me sound so old, but it wasn't the best. And I don't know if I'd actually recommend it unless you were tutoring someone in something that was quite specialized and you could actually charge, like $30, $40 or $50 an hour. But 20 is now technically like below minimum wage in New Zealand. My third income source was being a social media manager, and that brought in around $30,000 a year because I was charging about $500 a week. And what I did was when I was working actually as an optometrist, I had a really good sense of growing online communities. And I think people around me were noticing. I'd built one Instagram account called The Indian Feminist. And back then I grew it to 300,000 followers in university. And then I started growing the Girls That Invest Instagram account, and it went from 1,000 followers to 5,000 to 10,000 to 100,000 to 200,000 to 500,000. And it was something that I really, really found quite easy because I enjoy being on social media. I enjoy being online. I could figure out what the trends were. And so I started sharing more and more of that, just kind of sharing like on my Instagram, like, hey, we grew this much and yay, like let's do a giveaway. We hit 100,000 followers. And people around me started noticing. And I, tutored a few people in how to grow their social media. So that was a form of income where I'd have like a couple of students at a time and I'd be like, this is how I run it, da, da, da. And then I also started noticing that I had people saying, hey, we love what you do. Can you grow our social media? So I did the social media for a real estate investment company. And I have to say that was one of the best things I have ever done in my life because they were such a fun team, but they also taught me a lot about business. And I think they saw something in me where they were like, hey, like, this is how we set things up on Airtable and this is how we do this. And when you start managing people sim, like this is what you should do. So they were kind of like two older siblings that would help me out, but they were also really, really open to my opinions. And I remember sharing like, this is what you can do and this is how you can do it. And they started writing it down. And I remember thinking, why on earth would anyone write down what I'm sharing? Like to me, it was common knowledge, but it was something that I enjoyed. I even did social media for a competitor in the money space. I used to do the Instagram posts for She's on the Money. And they also had a business account called the Business Bible. And I would do some of that too. And I really enjoyed it. It helped me hone in on my skills. And I remember I made a little blunder once because I made a post for them and someone commented under it and was like, this is a ripoff of Simran Kaur's account from Girls That Invest. And then I had to comment and be like, actually, it's me running both the Instagrams. And so my style is similar. So that was a bit of a mistake. And while I think social media management can be difficult if it's not a skill set you have, if you enjoy that, I thought it was a fantastic side hustle income. Like I said, $30,000 a year. I really, really enjoyed it. And for me, it wasn't difficult. So I wasn't working on a per hour basis. I was working on a per post basis. I would say, hey, it's like $80 a post or $50 a post. Eventually it started becoming a bit more. But because I could make posts quite quickly, like guys, I can pump out a post in a couple of minutes. I was not working very hard because I had a skill that was quite built in, and it might take someone else who's new, hours to do it. So I was saving the company time, and I was also making money quite easily. Now, the second group of income sources that I had, I like to call them selling in my sleep. And selling in my sleep basically means that these were things that were bringing me income where I wasn't actually having to work in them day to day. I wasn't working on creating content or tutoring or, doing eye tests for people. I didn't have to physically be somewhere and give an hour of my time to make, $20. And so my fourth income stream was print on demand clothing and print on demand accessories. With one of my Instagram accounts that I was growing, I started noticing, this was back in like 2015, 2016, where people loved like die cut stickers and mugs with designs on them and like tote bags that were like, had slogans across them, same with t-shirts. So I really love art and designing, and I bought a really cheap Surface Pro. Do you remember Microsoft Surface Pros? I'm sure they still exist. I was obsessed with mine. Like when I could take my laptop screen and unclip it from the keyboard and put it on a table with like a little pen, incredible. Just so life-changing. So I started making designs and then putting them on that Instagram account that I had grown and being like, hey, if you want to buy this t-shirt, if you want to buy this mug, if you want to buy this tote bag, it's like $20. But print on demand meant that if someone bought it, and it would say in the description, like, this will take 2 or 3 days to be shipped, because what happened in those 2 or 3 days is that item would then be made. So someone buys a mug for, let's say, $15 or $10. The print on demand fulfillment center in the US would then take a plain mug and print onto the mug the design that I had made that had been already created and then selected by the person. And then they would ship it out and they would charge me, let's say, $5 to make and ship it. And so what I was able to do was, even when I was sleeping, I was able to make money if someone saw it, liked it, went onto my website and purchased it. And in the absolute best of years, I made up to $100,000. Sometimes it would be like $30,000. I think the first year I started it was $20,000, and I was able to stop my part-time job at university and just take that money. And obviously, initially, I bought a lot of makeup, a lot of Sephora orders, and then I started investing that money. And that's actually how my investing journey begun. Now, would I recommend this? Absolutely. I think I was able to take something that I was good at, which was being artistic, and found a way to say, hey, it's probably not easy to make like commissioned art for people every single time. I didn't really feel like I could charge a lot for commissioned art, but let me take the art that I make and put it on a t-shirt or put it on a tote bag and have someone else outsource that fulfillment, outsource that customer service, and just manage what I'm good at, which is making the art. So I really enjoyed that. Obviously, it's not an easy thing to set up. It's not like something that you do in a day. But I have to say, if you want to make money, you have to provide value. And whatever value that is, people will reward you. I know that there are a lot of qualms about capitalism, and I definitely do not think it is a perfect system and a perfect process. But I do know that capitalism rewards people that create things that other people want. And so I'd realized that other people really enjoy slogans and art that represents what's important to them, and something that's maybe thought-provoking that has someone else say like, hey, well, what's on your t-shirt? What does that mean? And then you can have a moment to have a conversation and say, hey, this, issue is really important to me, and this is why. Fifth income stream that I had was a dropshipping business. I did this in university, and it was a sunglasses dropshipping business because I was like, you know what? I'm an optometrist. I cannot find cheap sunglasses myself. Like, the $20, $30, $40 sunglasses. I don't want Gucci or like Tiffany sunnies. Like, I just want stuff that I can have a few pairs of. And I couldn't find any place to buy them online. And so I created a dropshipping business, and I made a beautiful website. I started an Instagram account for it, like typical Instagram to Shopify website fulfillment. And if someone bought something, it got fulfilled and sent, and I just took care of the customer service. Now that lasted me maybe like a couple of months. and I made about $2,000 to $5,000, and then I sold it for a couple of $1,000 because my heart was just not into it. And it was my first lesson of just because you can make money through something doesn't mean you will stick to it, because if you don't enjoy something, if it's like not your part of your personality or not part of something that you do, you will just get bored so quickly. So I actually do not, for myself, recommend this as a good side hustle. But if it was in a niche that you found interesting and it was a business model that worked for what you were trying to sell, and it was more of a stepping stone for you to test something and go, hey, you know what? I really believe in water bottles, and I've got this great water bottle idea, but before I test it properly and buy all this inventory, let me test it by drop shipping water bottles. Then you can actually see if there's a demand for it, if there's interest in it. And if there is, then you can find high quality water bottles from your own manufacturer and start that way. And the beauty of having businesses that help grow, when you quote unquote are asleep, is you can make more money than the amount of time that you have available. Someone wants to buy something when you are asleep, it gets fulfilled, it gets sent, they get it, and you are only part of the process in terms of bringing them in through advertising and taking care of the customer service. But besides that, you are able to scale at a much faster rate compared to a 9-to-5 job. And so I found that as a very good way to start growing my income. But as you see, one of them with Income 4, with a print on demand clothing, that was something I was passionate about. So it really worked. I made $100,000 a year up to. But with Income 5, with a dropshipping business, I only made $2,000 to $5,000, and I didn't even last a year. So that says a lot. Now, income number 6 is also a selling in my sleep categoried income source. And that was a salary that I would take out from my more current businesses. When I started, that was about $50,000 a year. Then it went up to about $120,000 a year. And more recently this year, I pulled out $200,000 a year as a salary, which is crazy, and I feel very blessed to do it. And I wanted to break down where the income comes from within the businesses to then provide me a salary. So for example, I do speaking, and I have speaking fees where I go off and give quotes. I've spoken at Google. I've spoken at the House of Parliament in the UK. I spoke for the High Commission of India on startups. I spoke at the Forbes 30 Under 30 Summit in Singapore. I have spoken in a lot of different places around the world. And when I first started, I did not take much of if at all, a salary, but now I take a speaking fee. And so that's one of the sources of income for one of the businesses. Another source of income from the businesses is digital products. So for example, with this business, we have a one investing masterclass. It's a flagship investing course that we run 3 or 4 times a year. We open it up, we run it, we close it, and it's very simple. It's a very great way to learn how to invest. And it's really the only course that we have. And so that brings in an income as well. And then the third is advertising. So we have ads on the podcast. And when you listen on Spotify or listen on Apple Podcasts, you get a little ad. We don't have ads on YouTube yet. And we also will do collaborations with brands. So for example, we did a investing webinar with a skincare company, and it was called Skinvesting, and it was all about how to invest in the share market, like Investing 101. And then they had a segment on how you can also invest in your skin. And so that was a free webinar to everyone that wanted to listen, but also had a paid ad in it. So the business makes money, but I don't get to take all the money from the business, because the businesses that I have also have people in them. And so the people have to get their salaries. So I pay salaries, I pay contractors, obviously pay tax. And then what's left over, I put some of it aside into the business as kind of like a rainy day fund. And then every year I take out a salary. And so it used to be about 50,000, then it went to 120,000, and now it sits at 200,000. Now, income number 6, would I say that this is a income source that I recommend? I think now I would say yes, but at the time it was a lot of extra hours put in. I would say I was working 50, 60, 70 hours a week just to build out some of the brands. But now that they're built and they have systems, it is a lot easier. I think it is not the like kind of get rich quick way of making money, but the income potential of this starts to grow year by year. And so I think in that way, I do recommend it, but it's not a passive form of income, which leads me to the last 4 income sources that I have, which are my passive income sources, the income sources that if I stop working, I will still earn from these. And that is why I'm not so much of a fan of income source number 6, or to be honest, like 1 to 6, because if I stop working, those things stop. Like if I stop making a newsletter, then we don't have newsletter ads. If I stop making podcasts, we don't get paid for podcast ads. If I stop like hopping on a plane and traveling somewhere to speak, I don't have, speaking income. And so all those things that create my salary are very dependent on me physically being places or creating things. And right now, that's fine. I love it. But what happens if I get sick or I get injured or I lose my voice? There's all these different things that could happen that don't make them reliable. And while it's a very nice income source, it is not something that I think would last forever. So I want to future-proof myself. And that's where the passive income comes in. Income source number 7 are royalties. And I get paid royalties through the book that I have. And with my book, I make around $40,000 to $100,000 a year, depending on how many sales of the book we have. It's been around only since July 2022. But to know that if people keep buying the book year on year and it keeps selling, it does really well for Christmas. I once saw someone be like, hey, I have my bridesmaids party coming up like my hens do, and I just bought all my bridesmaids your book. I see people buying it, like managers buying it for their staff. It is beautiful and it warms my heart. And seeing the Goodread reviews, guys, when I am sad, I go on Goodreads and I like scroll through and read the reviews of my book because they are so sweet. And we sold 100,000 copies. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Over the last 2 years, it has meant the world to me. But the book royalties are a fantastic passive income source because it is up to the publishers and the bookstores to sell it and ship it. I'm not involved in that. If someone orders a book and they want it like faster, I'm not the customer service behind it. So it is truly a passive source of income. And it is insane to me that I can make a royalty for the rest of my life that is sometimes equal or more than my job as an optometrist, which blows my mind. I cannot believe it. I'm so incredibly lucky. And that's what I like about passive income. It's not reliant on me as much, and I can start to like slowly relax. Am I relaxed yet? Absolutely not. But will I get there? One day. The 8th income source that I wanted to talk about is my rental income. So I have 2 rental properties and they bring me $60,000 in gross rent. Now, gross rent is, think of it like gross revenue, the top line of what I earn. So this is straight income that I get from the tenants, which is very, very nice. But I have to then pay for the mortgages that I have on these homes. If the tenants have anything that they want updated, I obviously update that, whether it's like updating a kitchen or making changes to the floorboards. I also have a management company that manages it, so that takes out a percentage of the fees. And so while I do not take home $60,000 a year, as the mortgage starts to get paid down a bit more, the like sort of net income will get closer to the gross rent. And that's a great thing. Another way that the rental properties give me an income, I take that back. It's not really an income. It is an increase in my net worth, but it is paper increases and I don't really count it, is the capital gains. So let's say the 2 houses go up in value and after 10 years, they are worth $500,000 more. That's amazing, but that makes no difference because I'm still going to own them. And so it's not like I can go out and buy something with that extra $500,000. I mean, I could use it to leverage myself and be like, hey, I need a loan from the bank to buy a business. I'm going to secure it against the houses that I have. But other than that, if I can't go out and buy groceries with the wealth that I have, then it's not really considered an income for me. So capital gains, I don't really count, especially if they're unrealized capital gains, which means capital gains that I'm not using. They're like still in the asset until I sell that asset. Now, the ninth source of income that I have is my share portfolio. My share portfolio provides me dividends and it also provides me capital gains. And so, for example, if my share portfolio goes up 10%, I have $1.3 million in there. So I make $130,000. Right now, I am not pulling anything out of my share portfolio. And if anything, from my salary, I'm trying to take as much as I can and put it into my portfolio because the goal is to eventually have enough invested that I can just pull 4% from that. And that ends up being my salary and I can retire because if you invest, let's say $2.5 million and the market goes up 7% and you pull 4% of that, then you almost have like your own trust fund, your own like endless pot of gold that you are just pulling a salary from and you don't have to work anymore. Or if you work, it is something that you do almost on top of having stability and having an income. But more importantly, when I pass away, that income, that portfolio will still exist and it will help pay for my kids when I have them to have a place or pay for my family to be able to look after themselves. So it is literally the creation of generational wealth. And while I didn't have that growing up, it's going to be something that I make sure I have going forward. Would I recommend rental incomes? Would I recommend book royalties? Would I recommend having a share portfolio? Absolutely. Having these things are so much easier to be able to grow and have income from than having a full-time job and doing side hustles and trying to create like another business on the side. Like that stuff brought me so many white hairs. You cannot see them because I pulled them out. But my final income source, my 10th income source that I wanted to share with you today is my alternative investment income. I invest not only in public markets, like having a broad market index fund and investing in individual companies, I also invest in private companies. This is done in two ways. I invest through what we call angel investing, where I put money into companies that I think are doing really, really well. These are not companies that are on the stock market yet, keyword being yet, but they're companies that are still quite small. So by putting in a bit of money, I might own like 1% or 2% of them. And when that company's value goes up more and more and more, I still own quite a bit of that and the amount of money I have goes up. You can also invest in private companies through venture capital. And so I also am an investor in venture capital. And if you want a video on how to angel invest and how to invest in VC, I definitely can do that. And while that is a source of income, I actually don't consider it something that is liquid yet because I don't want to pull that money out. And some of them actually cannot pull that money out until those gains are realized. The amount that can be made from this is uncapped. I've put around $40,000 in, but if I make, a 10 times return, that would be insane. But that is very unlikely. And the venture capital game is that for 10 investments you make, 8% of them will just lose money or just break even. If you put in $1,000, you'll get $1,000 back if you're lucky. But maybe 2 out of 10 of them will do really well and they'll become, the next Uber or the next Apple or the next Tesla. And that's where you make your money. So it is very risky. And so I don't keep a lot of my money in that. But also it is quite illiquid. And so while it is a source of income, it's a little bit like capital gains of a house. It's not money that I can just use and pay for to get groceries. And if I cannot buy groceries with it, I don't really see it as a reliable source of income. Is it something that I recommend? You have to be an institutional investor or an accredited investor to put your money into these things, which is basically when the government says, unless you make like $200,000 or $300,000 a year, or unless you have a net worth of $1 million or more, the government does not, in most countries from the US to the UK to Australia, New Zealand, they don't recommend that you invest in these things because the likelihood of them doing well aren't that high and it is very easy to get burnt. It's kind of like the Wild West, and you definitely want to make sure that you realize that there's some cowboys out there that kind of say one thing and do something else. So it's more of a protection mechanism. I don't think it's something that, is the main way the everyday person becomes wealthy. And while it's passive and I don't have to think about it, it also has higher fees. And I'd much rather prefer my public market investments because they are so much more liquid. And if I need to pull down from my S&P 500 fund and take money out, I can do that so much more easily. So those are my 10 income streams that I have grown from age 15 to age 28. I hope you have enjoyed them. I hope you've been able to figure out ones that you like and want to start doing and ones that you go, you know what, this is not for me. Congratulations on tutoring sim, but I am not doing that for a mere $1,000 a year. And to that I say, I respect it. I completely understand. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. The best thing that you can do is take a screenshot, put it on your Instagram story, send it to a friend, because this is how we get the podcast to grow. And this is how we get more people learning about how to grow their wealth, how to invest, because what else makes us happier than having a world where more of us have a better income, have choices, have more freedom? It's just the best thing ever. So with that, I'll see you next week.